You're working late tonight.
The passive type probably plays Nintendo.
You're working late tonight.
I can't. I got therapy.
The aggressive type probably plays Sega.
You're working late tonight.
Could we try that with a knock?
And the other type definitely plays 3DO, the most advanced home gaming system in the universe.
3DO from Panasonic, Gold Star, and Creative Labs. Now $3.99 plus free games.
The story of the 3DO starts in 1989. This is when Dave Needle, an Amiga engineer, and R.J. Michael, designer of the Atari Lynx, were having lunch together and drew up a design of a new game console on a napkin. Shortly after this, Needle and Michael's friend, EA founder Trip Hawkins, wanted to design a new game console, a next-gen 32-bit CD-based multimedia console. He spoke with Needle and Michael, and they showed him the design they drew up while eating lunch that day. Hawkins liked the design. In fact, he liked it so much he decided to partner with Needle and Michael to create a new company. And instead of trying to come up with a new design from scratch, he would use what they were already working on. Unlike other game console makers at the time, Hawkins didn't want to manufacture the systems. He wanted to license the technology to other companies to manufacture the consoles. This was a new business model that no one had ever tried before. Up to this point, console makers produced the consoles, usually at a loss, only to make a profit in licenses of games sold for the system. Really, it's the same business model that's used today, but Hawkins wanted to try out this new way of making consoles. The 3DO company was established on September 12, 1991. Around the same time, Hawkins stepped down as CEO of EA to run 3DO, but he still remained on EA's board until 1994. Larry Probst became EA's CEO. At this point, Hawkins started talks with other electronic companies to try to bring them on board to manufacture the 3DO. He even went to competitors like Sega. Tom Kalinske of Sega stated that they were in serious talks with 3DO to make the console, but pulled out due to the cost of making the console. Hawkins' main company he really wanted to partner with was Sony and Panasonic, two of Japan's biggest electronic manufacturers. Sony was not interested because they were already fully involved with the development of the PlayStation. Panasonic, on the other hand, liked the idea and wanted in. Other companies bought licenses too, such as Toshiba, AT&T, and Samsung, but none of these companies ever produced the console due to its high manufacturing cost. Panasonic was full in on the new console and designed what was called the Panasonic FZ1 3DO. They were first released in October of 1993 for a launch price of $699. These systems were marketed to high-end gamers and folks wanting the newest gen console. After the launch of the Panasonic 3DO, two other companies bought licenses and started making their own versions of the 3DO, Sanyo and Gold Star. Those 3DO systems were sold for much less. The Gold Star 3DO sold for $399, $300 less than the Panasonic FZ1 version. After 6 months on the market, Panasonic lowered the price of the FZ1 model to $499 while working on a cheaper, cost-reduced version to soon be released. Things seemed to be going okay with the launch, but things were not as they seemed. Initially, they were going to release the system with 5 launch titles: FIFA International Soccer, Jurassic Park Interactive, Return Fire, Road Rash, and Crash and Burn. But because developers were having issues working with the new high-end technology, and the fact that 3DO kept changing the hardware for the console, only made one game, and that was Crash and Burn. That wasn't the only issue they faced at launch time. Panasonic, the only manufacturer making the system at launch, did not have enough made to fulfill orders. This left retailers with only 2 or 3 per store at launch. Because of this, and pricing, only 30,000 units had sold by the end of November 1993. By March of 1994, 6 games were ready for the Japanese release of the console. The Japanese release did much better than the North American, selling over 70,000 units in the first few weeks. But soon, Sony released the PlayStation and Sega released the Saturn, bringing sales of the 3DO to a standstill. 3DO had claimed it was the most powerful console on the market. Until the PlayStation and the Saturn came out, that was the truth. To help with sales numbers, 3DO lowered the cost of all 3DOs to $299, making manufacturers take a $100 loss on each console sold. It was at this point 3DO really needed to do something and do something fast. They announced an add-on device called the M2. This was an accelerator to make the system more powerful than the PlayStation or the Saturn. They even started development of a whole new console based off the M2 technology. But sales of the console continued to fall. By December 1995, 3DO reduced the cost of the system even further to $199, hoping to increase sales. By early 1996, Gold Star dropped out of the agreement to make 3DOs. This was the beginning of the end. By spring, all third-party developers announced they were not making games for the system anymore. And by the end of the second quarter, 3DO's own software division stopped making games, leaving Panasonic as the only developer. By the end of 1996, the writing was on the wall. 3DO discontinued the console and divested its technology. 3DO restructured the company and sold off their hardware division to become a software company. Selling its hardware to Samsung, Samsung used the hardware to release consoles called the DMB800 in South Korea. But by early 1999, they too discontinued it due to poor sales. Well, that brings us to the end of the 3DO story. People may wonder why it wasn't successful. The hardware at the time of its release was actually pretty powerful. There were a few factors that did them in. One was the business model of having other manufacturers make the consoles. Only one other company had tried this and failed as well, Apple with the Pippin Atmark and the Pippin Atworld. But they did even worse than 3DO. This is because manufacturing consoles is always the money loser. Software sales and licensing is where they make the money. Just ask Microsoft, have they ever turned a profit on the Xbox sales yet? The other reason the 3DO failed was price. $699 in 1993 was an astonishing amount of money. Not too many people could afford it. Then there were the games. Not too many developers jumped on the 3DO bandwagon, making the licensed hardware manufacturers develop software. Probably not the best idea since they were already in the hole due to hardware costs. The 3DO had about a 3-year lifespan from 1993 to 1996, selling just over 2 million units worldwide and being the first video game console developer to have other companies license their tech to make the consoles. A unique business model that just couldn't cut it with the big console manufacturers like Sony and Sega at the time. Now let's take a look at some of my favorite games on the 3DO. This is just a small example of the 254 games that are in the 3DO library.
Let's get it on! Dude, I am so high. Dude, I am so high. It's tail time! For me? You should know. Soylent Green is good. Soylent Green is good.
シドウとは死ぬことと見つけたり、修羅道とは倒すことと見つけたり、我悪鬼羅刹となり、目の前の敵すべてを切る。
Hi, everyone. Welcome to John Madden Football. Well, the game's finally here. The teams are taking the field, and they're about ready to kick it off. Let's take a look at both teams. Here's how they match up.
Cleveland Browns. Call heads or tails. Tails. Denver Broncos. Will you kick off or receive? Cleveland Browns. Which goal will you defend?
Okay, here's the opening kickoff. Everyone should be ready.
Game over, man. It's game over.